He rejected his only daughter on live TV, unaware the billionaire CEO watching had other plans. You threw away a promising career for attention. I will not be associated with this embarrassment. A child out of wedlock by some nobody. You are no daughter of mine. Those words echoed through a television studio, broadcast live to 4.2 million viewers across America. The man speaking them was Douglas Mercer, renowned university chancellor, respected academic, pillar of his community. The woman receiving them was his only daughter, Sloane, 7 months pregnant, sitting under bright studio lights that suddenly felt too hot, too exposing, too cruel. But there was a third person in this equation, a man in a penthouse office 3,000 miles away, coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips, watching a scene that would ignite something fierce and unshakable inside him, a man who would make a single phone call that would change 3 lives forever. My name is Gideon Hartwell, and what I witnessed that morning wasn't just a father rejecting his daughter. It was a mirror held up to my own past, a past I'd spent 15 years trying to reconcile. When I saw Sloane Mercer's face, dignified even in devastation, I didn't see a stranger. I saw myself at 19, standing in my father's law office, being told I was dead to the family for choosing art over legacy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment everything shattered, and to the unexpected salvation that would rise from those broken pieces. Have you ever witnessed an injustice so profound that staying silent felt like complicity? Most of us scroll past those moments, uncomfortable but uninvolved. We tell ourselves it's not our business, not our place to intervene. But here's the truth most people won't admit. We watch because we're afraid. Afraid that getting involved means getting hurt. Afraid that caring makes us vulnerable. But what if that fear is exactly what keeps us from experiencing the most meaningful connections of our lives? You're still here, which means something in this story is already pulling at you. Don't fight it. Don't scroll away because you're afraid of feeling too much. The people who change lives aren't the ones who protect themselves from pain. They're the ones brave enough to lean into it. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this story. Let it change you. And if it does, prove that vulnerability isn't weakness by sharing it. Hit that like button. Drop a comment about a time someone showed up for you when they didn't have to. And subscribe to Cedar Drama, because we're building a community of people who believe that showing up matters. Now let me take you back to where this all started. The morning of October 7th started ordinarily enough for Sloane Mercer. She woke in her modest apartment in Brooklyn, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a neighborhood slowly shedding its industrial past for coffee shops and artist studios. At 29 years old, Sloane had built a life that felt authentic, if not particularly lucrative. Her second poetry collection, Inheritance of Silence, had just been named a finalist for the National Book Award. Her spoken word performances sold out small venues across the Eastern Seaboard. She taught poetry workshops at a community center in Queens, working with teenagers who'd never seen their experiences reflected in literature. And she was 7 months pregnant. The father was a musician named Tevin, a brief relationship that had burned bright and fast before fizzling into friendly distance. When Sloane discovered she was pregnant, Tevin had been honest. He wasn't ready for fatherhood. He'd contribute financially, but he couldn't be a present parent. Sloane had appreciated his honesty, even as it confirmed what she already knew. She would do this alone. Her apartment reflected her reality. Secondhand furniture arranged with artistic care, bookshelves overflowing with poetry, collections, and novels. A small corner set up as a nursery, modest but filled with love, a crib from a thrift store that she'd refinished herself, handmade mobiles created by artist friends. Everything spoke of creativity making up for limited resources. Sloane stood in front of her bathroom mirror that morning, smoothing down the deep purple maternity dress she'd chosen for the television appearance. Her natural hair was styled in neat twists that framed her face. She looked professional, confident, like someone whose career was ascending at exactly the right moment. Her phone buzzed with a text from her publicist. "Break a leg today. This interview is huge for the book. National exposure. Career-changing." Sloane placed her hand on her rounded belly, feeling the baby shift beneath her palm. "You hear that, little one? Mama's about to be on national television. Try not to kick me during the interview, okay?" The baby responded with what felt like a somersault. Sloane laughed, grabbing her bag and heading out into the crisp autumn morning. She had no way of knowing that in 3 hours, her entire life would detonate on live television. That the father she'd been estranged from for 2 years would become the architect of her most public humiliation. That a stranger watching from across the country would see that humiliation and decide to act. Morning America Rising filmed in a Midtown Manhattan studio, all glass and modern aesthetics designed to feel both aspirational and accessible. Sloane arrived 90 minutes early, as instructed, and was immediately swept into the machinery of television production. Makeup artists worked on her face, while producers explained the segment format. Hairstylists adjusted her twists. Wardrobe consultants approved her dress choice. The host, Vivienne Cross, stopped by the green room to introduce herself. Vivienne was a television veteran, 52 years old, with the kind of polished warmth that made guests feel simultaneously comfortable and slightly intimidated. "Sloane, I'm so thrilled to have you here." Vivienne's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Your poetry is absolutely stunning. I've been reading Inheritance of Silence all week. The piece about generational trauma and breaking cycles. That one gutted me. Thank you." Sloane felt herself relax slightly. "That means a lot coming from you. And congratulations." Vivienne's gaze dropped briefly to Sloane's belly. "When are you due?" "January 15th. Though she feels like she might have other plans. They always do." Vivienne laughed. "Listen, we want this interview to celebrate your work, your artistry, but our audience also loves personal stories. Would you be comfortable talking a bit about impending motherhood, how it's influencing your creative process?" Of course. Sloane had anticipated this. Her pregnancy was visible, unavoidable. Better to address it directly than pretend it didn't exist. "Wonderful. And hey, this might be fun." Vivienne's expression shifted to something more playful. "What if we call your family during the segment? Let them share in this exciting moment? Parents love being included in their children's success." Sloane's stomach tightened. "My family and we're not particularly close right now." "Oh." Vivienne's face showed genuine concern. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to presume." "It's fine." Sloane forced a smile. "Let's just focus on the book." "Absolutely. Completely your call." Except, it wasn't completely Sloane's call. Because television is a collaborative medium, and producers have agendas that don't always align with guests' comfort levels, and because someone on the production team thought a family reconciliation moment would make for compelling television, and because sometimes the universe conspires toward destruction with casual efficiency, the interview began smoothly. Sloane sat across from Vivienne in the studio's living room set, designed to evoke intimate conversation despite the cameras and crew surrounding them. They discussed Sloane's poetry, her creative process, the themes of inheritance and silence that threaded through her work. "Your poetry doesn't flinch from difficult truths." Vivienne leaned forward, engaged and engaging. "You write about family legacy, about the things we inherit beyond genetics, trauma, silence, expectation. Where does that exploration come from? From living it." Sloane's voice was steady, practiced from hundreds of poetry readings. "I grew up in a family where achievement was currency. My father is Douglas Mercer. He's the chancellor of Whitmore University. In our house, excellence wasn't encouraged, it was mandatory. But only certain kinds of excellence counted. What kinds didn't count? Art, creativity, anything that couldn't be measured by institutional metrics. When I chose poetry over law school, it created a rift that never quite healed." Vivienne nodded sympathetically. "And now you're about to become a mother yourself. How does that feel, knowing you're about to start your own family legacy?" "Terrifying." Sloane laughed, hand instinctively moving to her belly. "Also exhilarating. I think about all the patterns I want to break, all the different ways I want to show up for my daughter." "You're having a girl?" "Yes." Sloane's face softened. "A daughter. I'm still processing what that means." "That's beautiful." Vivienne paused, glancing at something off camera. "You know what? I know you said your family isn't close right now, but this is such a special moment. Your first book nomination, your first child. What if we tried to reach your father? Let him share in this joy? Sloane's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. I don't think that's a good idea. But Vivian was already gesturing to her producers, already committed to the bit. The machinery of live television moved forward with momentum that individual objections couldn't quite stop. Let's just try. Vivian's smile was encouraging, oblivious. Sometimes bridges can be built in unexpected moments. Sloane wanted to object more forcefully. Wanted to stand up and walk off set. But she was on live national television, 7 months pregnant, with a book career that desperately needed this exposure. So she sat, frozen, as a production assistant dialed a number and the call connected. The studio's large screen flickered to life, showing not a private office or home, but an auditorium. Douglas Mercer stood at a podium, mid-speech, his distinguished features enlarged on the screen behind him. He was addressing what appeared to be an educational conference, hundreds of academics watching his presentation on innovative pedagogical approaches. A conference organizer approached him, whispered something, gestured to a phone. Douglas's expression showed irritation at the interruption, but he accepted the device. The auditorium's technical team, perhaps thinking this was part of the program, projected the call onto the massive screen behind him. Douglas Mercer appeared on Sloane's studio screen, and Sloane appeared on the auditorium screen behind Douglas. Live television creating a recursive nightmare that would unfold in front of millions. Dad. Sloane's voice was cautious, already bracing for impact. Douglas's face, projected huge on both screens, cycled through confusion, recognition, and something harder to name. Disgust, maybe, or disappointment so profound it had curdled into contempt. Sloane. His voice was cold, formal. I'm in the middle of a presentation. I know. I'm sorry. This wasn't my idea. I'm doing an interview for Morning America Rising, they thought. You're doing what? His gaze finally seemed to register her appearance, the purple dress, the obvious pregnancy. On national television. Like this. The silence stretched, awful and electric. Vivienne, sensing the tension but misreading its source, jumped in with television host cheer. Chancellor Mercer, your daughter has just been nominated for the National Book Award, and she's expecting her first child, your first grandchild. Isn't that wonderful? Douglas's expression didn't soften. Behind him, the auditorium of academics watched in uncomfortable silence, witnessing a family disintegration in real time. Wonderful. He repeated the word like it tasted toxic. Is that what we're calling it? Sloane's face, visible to millions, showed the exact moment hope died. Dad, please. Please what? Douglas's voice rose, projection carrying through the auditorium and through television speakers across America. Please pretend I'm proud. Please celebrate that you threw away every opportunity I provided. That you rejected a future at a top law school for what? Poetry. That you're now unmarried and pregnant, broadcasting your poor choices to the entire country. Sloane's hand moved to her belly, protective, instinctive. This child isn't a poor choice. You threw away a promising career for attention. Douglas's words were surgical, precise, designed to wound. I will not be associated with this embarrassment. A child out of wedlock by some nobody. You are no daughter of mine. Do not contact me again. Do not use my name to advance whatever spectacle you're creating. The call disconnected. The studio was silent. Absolutely, devastatingly silent. Sloane sat under lights that suddenly felt unbearable, her father's rejection echoing through the space. Vivienne's face showed horror, the realization that her feel-good moment had detonated into something unspeakably cruel. Sloane, I am so, Vivienne started, but Sloane was already standing, already moving, her professional composure barely containing the fracture happening inside her. Excuse me. Sloane's voice was remarkably steady. I need a moment. She walked off set, past stunned crew members, past producers already calculating damage control, past the machinery of television that had just weaponized her family trauma for entertainment. She made it to the green room before her hands started shaking, made it to the private bathroom before the tears came. She stood at the sink, watching herself cry in the mirror, one hand on her belly where her daughter moved, restless and unknowing. I'm sorry, Sloane whispered to the baby, to herself, to the universe. I'm so sorry you just witnessed that. That the world just witnessed that. Her phone, left in her bag, was already exploding with messages. Social media was already dissecting what they'd seen. And 3,000 miles away, a man she'd never met was rewinding the footage, studying her face, and making a decision that would change everything. Stop right there. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you know where this story goes. Rejection, rock bottom, maybe some kind of rescue. But here's what most people get wrong about stories like this. The real transformation doesn't happen when someone saves you. It happens when someone sees you. Really sees you. Not your potential. Not what you could become if you just fixed yourself. But your worth exactly as you are. Broken pieces and all. Most of you watching right now have experienced some version of what Sloane just went through. Maybe not on national television, but the pain of rejection from someone who was supposed to protect you, that's universal. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You're probably still waiting for that person to come back and apologize. To finally see your worth. To validate that you were right to choose yourself. But what if they never do? What if the validation you're waiting for has to come from somewhere else entirely? Don't you dare click away now. Not when we're about to show you what's possible when you stop waiting for the wrong people to see you and start accepting love from the ones who already do. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever chosen yourself and been punished for it, this next part is for you. Like this video right now. Not because I'm asking, but because someone in your life needs to see it. Someone who's still waiting for validation from people who will never give it. Share this story. Save it. Send it to the person who needs permission to stop waiting. And subscribe, because Cedar Drama exists for the people brave enough to rebuild after rejection. Now, let me show you what happened next. Gideon Hartwell's penthouse office occupied the top floor of a building in downtown Seattle, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city and Puget Sound beyond. At 42 years old, Gideon had built an empire that started with a single art gallery and expanded into a foundation supporting marginalized artists across the country. His wealth came from understanding what others overlooked. Investing in artists before mainstream culture recognized their value, creating platforms for voices the establishment ignored. He'd been preparing for a meeting with his executive team when Morning America Rising appeared on the television mounted to his office wall. He usually kept it muted, background noise while he worked, but something made him unmute it that morning. Some instinct that what was unfolding deserved attention. He watched the entire disaster in real time. Watched Douglas Mercer's face harden with contempt. Watched Sloane's hope crumble into humiliation. Watched a father disown his pregnant daughter on live television while hundreds of academics and millions of viewers bore witness. Gideon's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. His entire body went still with recognition. He knew that look on Sloane's face. Had worn it himself 15 years ago when his own father told him to leave the family law firm and never come back. When choosing art over legacy meant choosing exile from everything he'd known. Gideon set down his coffee with careful precision and rewound the footage. Watched it again. Studied Sloane's face, the dignity she maintained even as her world collapsed. The protective hand on her belly, the way she held herself together until she could escape the cameras. His assistant, Neera, appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, ready to brief him on the morning schedule. She stopped when she saw his expression. You saw it too. It wasn't a question. Find out everything about Sloane Mercer. Gideon's voice was calm, controlled, the tone he used when decisions were already made and execution was just logistics. Her work, her financial situation, her support system. I want to know what she needs. Neera's eyebrows rose slightly. The poet from the interview? The artist who just had her personal trauma broadcast to millions. Gideon turned to face her fully. I want a meeting with her. This week if possible. Gideon, Neera's tone was careful, chosen for someone who'd worked with him long enough to speak candidly. She's in crisis right now. Approaching her might seem opportunistic, which is why we approach carefully, respectfully, with something genuine to offer. He pulled up Sloane's poetry on his computer, pages he'd already bookmarked months ago after reading her first collection. I've been following her work for over a year. The spoken word initiative we've been developing? She's exactly the kind of artist we created it for. Neera studied him, reading subtext the way only longtime colleagues could. This is personal for you. Gideon didn't deny it. My father disowned me when I was 19, told me I was wasting my potential, embarrassing the family, choosing failure over the future he'd planned. His gaze returned to the frozen image of Sloane on the screen. I know exactly what she's feeling right now. The shame, the isolation, the fear that maybe they're right about you. And you want to what? Rescue her? I want to offer her what no one offered me. Gideon's voice was firm, a chance to prove her worth on her own terms, resources to build the career she deserves, recognition that her father's rejection says everything about his limitations and nothing about her value. Neera nodded slowly, already making notes on her tablet. I'll reach out through her publicist, frame it as professional interest in her work. Because it is professional interest, Gideon clarified. The foundation needs someone with her vision to lead the spoken word initiative. The timing is coincidental, but the opportunity is genuine. And if she says no, then we respect that. But Neera, he met her eyes with quiet intensity, make sure she knows this isn't charity, this is business. We're offering her a position because she's the best person for it, not because we feel sorry for her. After Neera left, Gideon pulled up Sloane's poetry collection on his computer and began reading. Not for the first time, but with new context. Every poem about family expectation and artistic calling felt different now. Every line about inheritance and breaking patterns carried additional weight. He reached the final poem in the collection, titled Silence as Legacy. It began, My father taught me that love is conditional, that worth must be earned through compliance, that the price of belonging is the death of self. So I choose exile. I choose the conversation he refused to have. I choose the daughter he could not see. And in choosing her, I choose myself. Gideon read the last lines twice, something tightening in his chest. Sloane had written this before the pregnancy, before this morning's public rejection. She'd already been grappling with her father's conditional love, already been choosing herself over his approval. What happened this morning wasn't the beginning of their estrangement. It was just the most public chapter. He picked up his phone and texted Neera. Whatever her publicist asks for the meeting, agree to it. Her terms, her timeline, her comfort level. We wait as long as she needs. 3 days passed before Sloane agreed to the meeting. 3 days of media circus, of think pieces about family estrangement and public humiliation, of her phone ringing constantly with interview requests and messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. 3 days of staying in her apartment, curtains drawn, trying to protect herself and her unborn daughter from the chaos swirling outside. Her publicist called on the 3rd day with the meeting request from Hartwell Arts Foundation. Sloane, I know you're overwhelmed right now. Jenna's voice was gentle, careful. But this might be worth considering. Gideon Hartwell wants to meet with you about a professional opportunity. I'm not doing any more interviews. Sloane was curled on her couch, hand on her belly, exhausted from crying and from the constant movement of her daughter, who seemed to sense her mother's distress. It's not an interview, it's a job offer. He's launching some kind of spoken word initiative and wants to discuss you leading it. Sloane was quiet for a long moment. Why now? Right after the most humiliating moment of my life? It feels like pity. He specifically said to tell you it's not pity, Jenna replied. That he's been following your work for over a year, that the timing is coincidental but the opportunity is genuine. What kind of opportunity? He wouldn't give details over the phone. Wants to discuss it in person, at your convenience, wherever you're comfortable. Sloane considered. She desperately needed income. Her teaching position paid barely enough to cover rent. Her poetry brought in almost nothing. The book advance had been modest and was nearly gone. She'd been budgeting carefully for maternity leave, calculating how long she could survive without steady work. But more than money, she needed purpose. Needed to prove that her father was wrong, that choosing poetry wasn't choosing failure. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll meet with him. They arranged to meet at a quiet restaurant in Brooklyn, close to Sloane's apartment, at a time she suggested. Gideon flew to New York 2 days later, clearing his schedule with the kind of efficiency that came from having resources and determination in equal measure. Sloane arrived 15 minutes early, a lifelong habit, and was shown to a private corner table. She wore a simple black maternity dress and minimal makeup, her hair in the same twists from the interview. She looked tired but composed, like someone who'd been through battle and was still standing. Gideon arrived exactly on time. Sloane recognized him from photos: tall, lean build, dark hair graying at the temples, dressed in expensive but understated clothing. But what struck her was his face. Kind eyes. The expression of someone who'd known pain and come through it with empathy and tact. Sloane. He extended his handshake firm but not aggressive. Thank you for meeting with me. I know this week has been difficult. That's an understatement. Sloane's voice was wary, guarded. They sat. A server appeared with water and menus, then tactfully disappeared. I'm not going to pretend I didn't see what happened. Gideon's directness was unexpected, refreshing. I watched the interview. I saw your father's rejection, and I want you to know that my offer has nothing to do with pity and everything to do with professional respect. Sloane studied him, trying to read intention beneath polished surface. Your publicist said you've been following my work? For about 14 months. I read Inheritance of Silence when it was first published. Bought 20 copies and sent them to arts educators I work with. I've attended 3 of your spoken word performances in the past year. You have? Sloane was genuinely surprised. I travel frequently for foundation work. Made sure my New York trips coincided with your performance schedule. He smiled slightly. The one at the New Yorker in March, that was extraordinary. The piece about silence as inheritance, it stayed with me for weeks. Sloane felt something shift slightly. This wasn't pity. This was someone who actually knew her work. So what's this opportunity? She asked directly. Gideon leaned forward slightly, engaged and engaging. The Hartwell Foundation has been developing a national spoken word initiative for underrepresented voices. We want to create platforms, fund programs, support artists who reflect experiences that mainstream culture ignores. We need someone to lead it. Someone with artistic credibility and community connection. Someone who understands both the art form and its social impact. And you think I'm that person? I know you are. You've been teaching workshops in Queens for 3 years. Your students win national competitions. Your own work bridges academic recognition and community relevance. You understand poetry as both art and activism. Sloane was quiet, processing. This sounds expensive. Elaborate. It is. Which is why we need the right person leading it. Someone I can trust with substantial resources and creative control. He pulled a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. This is a preliminary outline. Salary range, benefits package, organizational structure, creative parameters. It's a starting point for discussion, not a final offer. Sloane opened the folder, scanned the first page, and froze. The salary figure was 3 times what she currently made. The benefits included health insurance that would cover her pregnancy and delivery, maternity leave, fully paid, childcare support when she returned to work. She looked up, searching his face for the catch. This is incredibly generous. It's competitive for an executive position with national scope. Gideon's voice was matter-of-fact. You'd be building something from the ground up. That requires vision, experience, and significant time commitment. The compensation reflects that. Why me? Sloane asked again, needing to understand. There are other poets, other educators. Because I recognize that look you wore on television. Gideon's carefully maintained professional distance cracked slightly, revealing something raw underneath. The look of someone being rejected by a parent who was supposed to protect them. I wore that same look 15 years ago when my father told me to leave his law firm and never come back. Sloane went still, attention fully focused. My father built a prestigious firm over 40 years, Gideon continued. Expected me to be his successor. When I told him I wanted to work in arts instead, he said I was wasting my potential, embarrassing the family, choosing poverty over legacy. He gave me a choice. The firm or exile. I chose exile. Have you spoken to him since? Twice. My mother's funeral, my sister's wedding. Both times he made it clear I was only welcome because family appearances mattered to him. Gideon's expression held old pain, carefully managed. So when I saw your father reject you, I didn't see a stranger's tragedy. I saw my own past. And I thought about what I needed back then. What did you need? Someone to tell me my choice wasn't wrong, that choosing myself wasn't selfish, that building a different kind of life didn't mean building a lesser one. He met her eyes directly, and practical support. Resources to actually pursue what I'd chosen instead of just surviving in poverty to prove a point. Sloane felt tears threatening, pushed them back. This is a lot to process. Take all the time you need. There's no pressure. If you're not interested, that's completely fine. If you want to think about it, take weeks, months. He hesitated, then added quietly, and Sloane, regardless of whether you take this position, your father was wrong. About you, about your work, about what constitutes a life well lived, I hope you know that. Something cracked in Sloane's carefully maintained composure. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. I don't know that at all, actually. I've spent 3 days wondering if he's right. If I did throw everything away for a career that doesn't pay bills. If having this baby alone is proof of every bad choice I've made. Her hand moved to her belly, protective even as she questioned herself. Can I tell you what I see when I look at your work? Gideon asked gently. Sloane nodded, not trusting her voice. I see someone brave enough to build a life aligned with her values instead of someone else's expectations. I see art that gives voice to people who've been systematically silenced. I see workshops that transform teenagers' understanding of what's possible for them. His voice was quiet but certain. Your father sees failure because he measures worth by institutional prestige. But actual worth? The kind that changes lives? You have that in abundance. Sloane wiped her eyes, embarrassed by crying in front of a stranger. Sorry. Pregnancy hormones. You don't need to apologize. Gideon's kindness was almost harder to bear than her father's cruelty. Take your time with the offer. I'll be in New York for 2 more days if you want to discuss further. Otherwise, my contact information is in the folder. He stood to leave, giving her space. Gideon. Sloane's voice stopped him. Why are you really doing this? He turned back, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Because no one did it for me. Because I spent years struggling unnecessarily. Because I built the foundation I wish had existed when I was starting out. And because I believe in your work. All of those things are true simultaneously. After he left, Sloane sat with the folder, reading through the detailed proposal. It was real, comprehensive, not a rescue mission but a genuine professional opportunity. She placed her hand on her belly, where her daughter moved in rhythmic waves. What do you think, little one? Should Mama take a chance on someone who actually sees her value? The baby kicked, forceful and insistent. Sloane laughed. The first genuine laugh since the interview disaster. I'll take that as a yes. She pulled out her phone and texted the number from the folder. When can we discuss start dates? The response came within minutes. Whenever you're ready. This opportunity will wait for you. Sloane felt something unfamiliar after 3 days of shame and doubt. Hope. Fragile. Cautious. But undeniably present. Maybe, she thought. Maybe devastating endings can become unexpected beginnings. Maybe exile from one family creates space for another kind of belonging. Maybe her father's rejection wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a chapter he'd never understand. She opened her laptop and began writing, words flowing like they hadn't in weeks. A new poem taking shape about doors closing and windows opening, about finding family in unexpected places, about the people who show up when blood relatives walk away. 3,000 miles away, Gideon read her text and allowed himself a small smile. He'd built a career on recognizing undervalued artists before the rest of the world caught up. On creating opportunities for voices the establishment ignored. But this felt different, more personal, like correcting an old wound by preventing a new one. He thought about his own father, about the years of silence between them, about the price of choosing yourself over someone else's vision. Then he thought about Sloane, about the daughter she was carrying, about the family they would build without his help but perhaps with his support. Sometimes, he thought, the most powerful thing we can do is show up for someone the way we wish someone had shown up for us. He opened his calendar and began clearing space for the real work ahead, building something that would matter, creating platforms that would amplify voices like Sloane's, giving someone the chance he'd fought so hard to create for himself. This, he thought, was what wealth was actually for. Not accumulation for its own sake, but leverage to shift the world towards something better, one artist at a time, one opportunity at a time, one choice to see someone's value when others chose blindness. The sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. In Brooklyn, the same sunset arrived 3 hours later, washing Sloane's apartment in warm light as she wrote, and her daughter moved beneath her heart, and somewhere in the space between devastation and hope, a new story was beginning. One that neither of them could have predicted, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, belonging, and what it means to be truly seen. But that story, the real story, was just getting started. Sloane signed the contract 3 weeks later, sitting in a conference room at the Hartwell Foundation's New York satellite office. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrote her signature, not from doubt but from the magnitude of what this represented. A salary that would actually support her and her daughter, health insurance that covered her high-risk pregnancy, a career that aligned with her values instead of compromising them. Gideon sat across from her, professional but warm, flanked by the foundation's legal team and HR director. When she set down the pen, he extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Sloane. I think we're going to build something extraordinary together. I hope I can live up to your expectations." The old doubt crept in, her father's voice echoing in her head about wasted potential and poor choices. "You already have." Gideon's certainty was unshakable. "Your workshop curriculum alone is worth twice what we're paying you. Everything else is bonus." Over the next 2 months, Sloane threw herself into the work with focused intensity. She developed a national framework for the spoken word initiative, identifying cities with underserved artistic communities, recruiting local poets as regional directors, creating curriculum that balanced artistic development with social justice education. She worked from home mostly, her energy limited by advancing pregnancy, but her mind sharp and engaged in ways it hadn't been in years. Gideon checked in regularly, their communication professional but increasingly comfortable. He never asked about her personal life unless she brought it up, never mentioned her father or the interview, treated her exactly like what she was, a valued executive building something important. But he noticed things. When she mentioned being tired, he adjusted meeting schedules without being asked. When she worried about project timelines conflicting with her due date, he quietly reassigned tasks to ensure nothing critical depended solely on her. When she casually mentioned her apartment building had no elevator and stairs were getting difficult, he had HR research accessible housing options near the office, presenting it as standard relocation assistance for executives. "You don't have to do all this," Sloane told him during a video call in early December, 8 months pregnant and visibly exhausted. "I can manage. I know you can." Gideon's response was gentle but firm. "But you shouldn't have to manage alone." "Accepting support isn't weakness, Sloane. It's wisdom." She studied him through the screen, this man who kept showing up with quiet consistency. "Did you have support when you started out? After your father cut you off?" Gideon was quiet for a moment. "No. I worked 3 jobs while building my first gallery, slept on friends' couches, ate ramen more meals than I care to count. It took me 5 years to achieve financial stability." He met her eyes directly through the camera. "Which is exactly why I'm committed to making this easier for you. No one should have to struggle that hard just to prove their worth." Sloane felt something shift in her chest, gratitude mixed with something harder to name. "Thank you for seeing me, for this opportunity. Thank you for trusting me enough to say yes." After the call, Sloane sat with her hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's increasingly vigorous movements. The baby was active lately, constantly shifting and kicking, as if she too sensed the approaching transition. "Your mama met a good person, little one," Sloane whispered. "Someone who shows up. Remember that when you're older. Remember that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who chooses to stand beside you." 2 weeks before her due date, Sloane attended the Foundation's annual gala, her first public appearance since the disastrous interview. She wore a stunning emerald gown that accommodated her full-term pregnancy, her hair styled in elegant locks, her makeup flawless. She looked radiant, powerful, nothing like the devastated woman from that television studio. Gideon found her near the silent auction tables, studying the donated artwork. "You look beautiful." His compliment was sincere, respectful. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm carrying a bowling ball that keeps rearranging my internal organs." She laughed. "But good." Excited to meet her. Terrified to meet her. All the normal things. "When's your due date again?" "January 15th. But she feels impatient. Might come early. "You have support lined up? Someone to be with you during labor?" Sloane's expression flickered, vulnerability breaking through her composure. "My doula, Miriam. She's wonderful, very experienced. But I'm doing this alone otherwise. The father is contributing financially but not present. My mother passed away when I was in college. My father, well, she didn't need to finish that sentence. I have friends, but everyone's busy with their own lives. I'll be fine." Gideon's expression showed something that looked like pain. "You shouldn't have to do this alone. It's okay. Millions of women give birth without partners there. I'll manage." Before Gideon could respond, a donor approached, wanting to discuss the spoken word initiative, and the moment passed. But something had been said, acknowledged, filed away for future consideration. The gala continued around them, successful and celebratory, raising over $2 million for foundation programs. Sloane fielded questions about the initiative, networked with potential partners, represented the foundation with eloquence and passion. To outside observers, she was the picture of professional success, pregnant and glowing, career ascending, future bright. But Gideon watched her carefully throughout the evening, noticed the moments when her hand pressed against her lower back in discomfort, the way she shifted her weight constantly, seeking relief from the physical burden of late pregnancy, the flash of loneliness that crossed her face when couples danced together, partners supporting each other in ways she'd never experienced. As the gala wound down, he found her again, sitting alone at a table, feet clearly aching in her heels. "Can I drive you home?" he offered. "I have a car waiting. I can take a cab." "I know. But I'm offering a more comfortable option." She studied him, looking for ulterior motive and finding only genuine concern. "Okay, thank you." The drive to her Brooklyn apartment was quiet, comfortable silence rather than awkward tension. Sloane leaned back against the luxury car's leather seats, visibly relieved to be off her feet. "You did beautifully tonight," Gideon said as they crossed the bridge into Brooklyn. Donors were genuinely excited about the initiative. It's easy to be excited about good work. Sloane's voice was soft, tired. "You've given me resources most artists never get. A platform that actually matters. You're the one building it. I just provided funding. Funding is everything." She turned to look at him in the dim car interior. "Do you know how many brilliant artists I know who never get opportunities because they can't afford to take risks? Who work soul-crushing jobs just to survive while their creativity withers? Money isn't everything, but pretending it doesn't matter is a privilege most artists can't afford, which is why the foundation exists. To change that equation." The car pulled up to her building, a modest walk-up in a neighborhood that was gentrifying but not yet gentrified. Gideon started to get out to help her, but she waved him off. "I'm okay, just very pregnant and very tired." He nodded, settling back but keeping his door open. "Sloane, before you go, can I ask you something?" "Of course. If you go into labor, if you need anything, will you call me? Even if it's the middle of the night, even if it seems like too much to ask." Sloane's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Gideon, you don't have to. I know, but I want to. You've become important to this foundation, yes, but also..." He paused, choosing words carefully. "You've become a friend, and friends show up for each other." Sloane nodded, not trusting her voice, and climbed out of the car. As she walked toward her building, she turned back. Gideon was still watching, making sure she got inside safely. She waved, he waved back. Something warm and unfamiliar spread through her chest. Maybe, she thought, climbing the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd believed. Her daughter was born 9 days later, 3 weeks before her due date, on a Tuesday morning that started with Sloane's water breaking while she was reviewing grant applications at her kitchen table. For 30 seconds, she froze, panic flooding her system. Then training took over. She called her doula, called 911, grabbed the hospital bag she'd packed weeks earlier. While she waited for the ambulance, she hesitated over her phone. Gideon's number pulled up but not yet dialed. "Don't be ridiculous," she told herself. "He's your boss. This is personal." He was just being polite when he offered. But another contraction hit, stronger than the first, and suddenly being alone felt unbearable. She texted quickly. "In labor. Heading to Brooklyn Methodist. Just wanted you to know I'll be out of pocket for a bit. Don't worry. I'm fine." The ambulance arrived before he could respond. Sloane rode to the hospital, breathing through contractions, Miriam meeting her in the emergency entrance with calm, experienced presence. "You're doing great, Sloane." Miriam's voice was soothing as they transferred her to a birthing suite. "Labor's progressing nicely. Baby's heart rate is strong. Everything looks good." Sloane nodded, gripping the bed rails as another contraction built and crested. She'd read about labor, taken classes, thought she was prepared, but the reality was overwhelming, primal, all-consuming in ways no description had captured. Miriam stayed close, coaching her breathing, applying counterpressure to her back, advocating with nurses for the pain management Sloane had requested. Hours blurred together, pain and rest cycling in waves that felt both endless and too fast. She was 7 centimeters dilated when Gideon appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless like he'd been running, eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. "Sloane." Relief flooded his features. "I came as soon as I got your text. I was in a meeting, didn't see it for an hour. Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" "We're fine," Sloane managed between contractions. "You didn't have to come all the way from Manhattan. I was already on my way when your second text came through." He stayed in the doorway, uncertain. "I don't want to intrude. I just wanted to make sure you had everything you needed." Another contraction hit, stealing her breath. Miriam moved to her side, supporting her through it. When it passed, Sloane looked at Gideon, something cracking in her carefully maintained independence. "Stay. If you want." I don't want to do this alone." Gideon's expression transformed. Surprise and tenderness and something deeper. "I'd be honored." He moved into the room, shedding his suit jacket, rolling up his sleeves like he was preparing for actual work. Miriam briefed him quickly on how he could help, and he listened with focused attention, asking clarifying questions, taking it seriously. The next 6 hours unfolded in a blur of intensity. Gideon stayed at Sloane's shoulder, holding her hand through contractions, offering ice chips, speaking quiet encouragement when she was certain she couldn't continue. He didn't flinch from the raw reality of labor, didn't make it about him, just remained steady and present through every wave. "You're doing so well," he murmured during a particularly brutal contraction. "So strong. Almost there." "Sloane, I can't," she sobbed, exhausted beyond measure. "I can't do this anymore." "You can. You are." His hand was warm in hers, solid and certain. "Your daughter is almost here. She's so lucky to have you as her mother." Something about his absolute conviction carried her through when her own was failing. At 4:17 in the afternoon, after one final overwhelming push, her daughter entered the world with a sharp, indignant cry that was the most beautiful sound Sloane had ever heard. "It's a girl," the doctor announced unnecessarily. "A beautiful, healthy girl." The nurse placed the baby on Sloane's chest, vernix covered and squirming and absolutely perfect. Sloane looked down at her daughter's scrunched face, at her tiny fingers curling and uncurling, and felt love so fierce it was almost frightening. "Hi, baby girl," she sobbed, joy and exhaustion and wonder all mixed together. "Hi, I'm your mama. I've got you. I've always got you." She became vaguely aware of Gideon stepping back, giving her space for this sacred first meeting. When she looked up, his face was wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. "Do you want to hold her?" Sloane heard herself ask, the offer surprising her even as she made it. Uncertainty flickered across his features. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to." "I'm sure." He approached with reverent caution, accepting the swaddled newborn into his arms with careful precision. The baby squinted up at him, dark, unfocused eyes trying to make sense of this new face. "Hello, little one." Gideon's voice was rough with emotion. "You are so loved, so wanted, so absolutely perfect." The baby's tiny hand found his finger, gripped it with surprising strength. Gideon's breath caught, his eyes meeting Sloane's over the baby's head. Something profound passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but connection deeper than either had anticipated. Recognition of paths intersecting exactly when they were meant to. "What will you name her?" he asked softly. Sloane had considered many names during pregnancy, but looking at her daughter now, born of chaos yet entering the world with such determined strength, only one felt right. Ivy. After my grandmother. The only person in my family who loved me without conditions. "Ivy," Gideon repeated, smiling down at the infant. "It's perfect. She's perfect." Later, after Ivy had been weighed and measured and returned to Sloane for feeding, after Miriam had left and visiting hours had technically ended, Gideon remained. The nurses didn't enforce the rules, perhaps sensing that this wasn't a casual visitor but something more essential. He sat in the uncomfortable recliner beside Sloane's bed while she dozed, exhausted from labor, Ivy sleeping in the bassinet between them. He watched the baby breathe, studied her miniature features, felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't known was unsettled. When Sloane woke a few hours later, disoriented and sore, she found him still there. "You stayed." Her voice was hoarse from screaming through contractions. "Wanted to make sure you both were okay," he said quietly. "I can leave if you need rest." "No, stay, if you want." She adjusted the bed to sitting position, wincing at the movement. "Thank you for being here. I couldn't have done it without you." "You absolutely could have. But I'm grateful I didn't have to miss it." Ivy stirred in her bassinet, making the small sounds that preceded full waking. Sloane started to get up, but Gideon was already on his feet. "Let me." He lifted the baby with growing confidence, brought her to Sloane. "You need to rest." As Sloane fed Ivy, Gideon settled back in the recliner, watching them with expression that was becoming familiar. Care mixed with wonder, mixed with something that looked like longing. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sloane said softly. "Of course." "Why are you really here?" Not the professional answer. The real one. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. "Because when my father cut me off, I spent years alone, building everything from nothing with no support system, no safety net, no one to call when things got hard. And it worked. Eventually, I built a successful life. But it was lonely in ways that still affect me." His eyes met hers. "When I saw you on that television screen, rejected and pregnant and alone, I saw a chance to be for you what no one was for me. Not a savior, just someone present. You've been more than present." Tears gathered in Sloane's eyes. "You've been everything. You would have been fine without me. Maybe. But I'm grateful I didn't have to be." Ivy finished feeding and fell back asleep against Sloane's chest. Gideon stood, gently taking the baby to burp her, movements becoming practiced through repetition. "I should let you rest," he said after settling Ivy back in the bassinet. "You've been through an ordeal. Will you come back?" Sloane asked, hating how vulnerable she sounded. "Tomorrow? Every day." His certainty was absolute. "If you want me here, I'm here." After he left, Sloane lay in the dark hospital room, listening to Ivy's soft breathing, processing everything that had happened. This man who'd appeared in her life at her lowest moment had become something she hadn't expected. Not a boss, not exactly a friend, but someone who showed up consistently, who saw her worth when her own father had denied it. What happens now? She wondered, studying Ivy's sleeping face. Where do we go from here? But exhaustion claimed her before she could pursue the thought further. Pause for a second. Look at what just happened. A man who had every reason to protect himself from emotional entanglement just spent 6 hours coaching a woman through labor. Not his child, not his responsibility, just his choice. And here's what nobody talks about when we discuss showing up for people. It's not romantic. It's not Instagram-worthy. It's ice chips and back pressure and holding someone's hand while they scream. It's the decidedly unglamorous work of being present when presence is all you have to offer. Most people watching this are waiting for the fairy tale moment, the grand gesture, the dramatic rescue. But real love, the kind that actually changes lives, looks like this. Quiet consistency, showing up when it's inconvenient, choosing someone's well-being over your own comfort. And I know what some of you are thinking. This is too good to be true. Men like Gideon don't exist. People don't just show up without wanting something in return. And you know what? You're right to be skeptical. Most people don't show up. Most people protect themselves. Most people choose comfort over commitment. But that's exactly why this story matters, because it shows us what's possible when someone breaks that pattern, when someone chooses differently. If you've ever been the person who shows up, who stays when everyone else leaves, who loves without expecting anything back, drop a comment right now. Tell us about it, because your story matters too. And if you've never experienced that kind of presence, if you're still waiting for someone to choose you the way Gideon chose Sloane, subscribe to Cedar Drama, because we're going to keep telling stories that remind you what you deserve, what's actually possible, what real love looks like when it's not performing for an audience. Now watch what happens when two people stop pretending they're just friends. Gideon returned the next morning with coffee for Sloane and breakfast from a bakery near the hospital. He stayed for 3 hours, holding Ivy while Sloane showered, handling diaper changes with increasing competence, entertaining the nurses with his careful questions about newborn care. "You're researching infant development, aren't you?" Sloane asked, watching him cradle Ivy with practiced ease. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have purchased several books on newborn neuroscience and attachment theory." "Of course you did," she laughed despite her exhaustion. "The billionaire who researches everything. I want to understand her experience. What she needs at this stage of development. Most people would just wing it. Most people aren't trying to be helpful without overstepping." His honesty was disarming. The pattern continued over the next 2 weeks. Gideon visited daily, sometimes for hours, helping with tasks Sloane struggled to manage alone in her third-floor walk-up. He arranged for a cleaning service without asking, had groceries delivered, quietly paid for a postpartum doula to check on Sloane and Ivy 3 times a week. When Sloane protested that it was too much, he was gently immovable. "Consider it employee benefits. The foundation wants its artistic director healthy and supported. This goes beyond employee benefits. Then consider it friendship. Friends help friends." Their relationship existed in undefined territory. More than professional, not quite romantic, bound by genuine care and growing attachment that neither fully acknowledged. Ivy became the bridge between them, the tiny person who required their coordination and cooperation. When Ivy smiled for the first time at 6 weeks old, it was at Gideon during a Sunday visit. When she started tracking objects with her eyes, it was his face she followed. When she needed soothing at night, Sloane found herself texting him, and he would talk her through techniques he'd researched. "She remembers you," Sloane observed one afternoon, watching Ivy settle immediately when Gideon picked her up. "She's calm with you in ways she isn't with anyone else." "Newborns recognize voices and smells," Gideon replied, ever the researcher. "Their memory systems are still developing, but they form attachments to consistent caregivers." "Is that what you are? A caregiver?" Gideon's eyes met hers over Ivy's head, something vulnerable in their depths. "I'd like to be, if you're comfortable with that." Sloane studied him. This man who'd inserted himself into their lives with careful respect, never demanding, always offering. "I don't know what this is. Us. This dynamic. Neither do I," he admitted. "But it feels right, important. Like something worth figuring out together." At 3 months, Sloane returned to work part-time. The foundation had created a private nursing room adjacent to her office, stocked with everything she might need. Gideon's assistant had coordinated it all, following his specific instructions to ensure Sloane's comfort. "You really thought of everything," Sloane said, surveying the space that made continuing breastfeeding possible while working. "We want you here, but we want Ivy cared for too." Gideon was matter-of-fact. Working parents need support, not obstacles. As the months passed, the spoken word initiative flourished under Sloane's leadership. 5 cities launched programs. Local poets found platforms they'd never had. Teenagers discovered voices they hadn't known they possessed. The The foundation's investment was paying off in measurable community impact. But the real transformation was happening in quieter spaces. In Sloane's apartment where Gideon became a regular presence. In Sunday brunches that became tradition. In late-night conversations after Ivy was asleep, where two people who'd both been rejected by fathers slowly learned to trust each other. When Ivy was 6 months old, she said her first word. Sloane was working at her laptop while Ivy played on a mat nearby. Gideon had stopped by with dinner, Chinese takeout from Sloane's favorite restaurant. He was assembling containers at the kitchen counter when Ivy pulled herself up on his pant leg, bouncing excitedly. Dada. They both froze. The word hung in the air, impossible to unhear. She's just babbling. Sloane said quickly, all babies make those sounds at this age. Ivy patted Gideon's leg insistently. Dada. There was no mistaking the intention. Not random syllables, but deliberate address. Gideon looked at Sloane, his expression raw with emotion and uncertainty. I haven't. We haven't. I would never presume. I know. Sloane felt her own throat tighten. But she sees you more than anyone except me. You've been here for every milestone. It makes sense she would associate you with paternal presence, he finished quietly. Is that okay? Do you want me to redirect her? Sloane watched them together. Ivy completely at ease against his legs, Gideon's hands instinctively positioned to support without restricting her movement. The natural comfort of their interaction spoke volumes. Would it be okay if she calls you that? Sloane's voice trembled slightly. Gideon knelt beside Ivy, his composure cracking completely. Sloane, it would be the greatest honor of my life. Something shifted between them. Acknowledgement of what had been building across months of shared purpose and mutual care. We should talk, Sloane said softly. About what this means. What we're becoming. After Ivy is asleep, he agreed, understanding layered beneath the simple words. That evening, after Ivy was settled in her crib, they sat together on Sloane's couch, the professional distance finally impossible to maintain. I don't know when it happened, Sloane began, hands wrapped around a mug of tea for something to hold. But somewhere between business meetings and midnight feedings and Sunday brunches, you became essential. To both of us. Gideon's expression was carefully controlled, though intensity burned in his eyes. Essential how? She met his gaze directly. I've fallen in love with you. Not because you rescued me from a bad situation, but because you never tried to rescue me at all. You just stood beside me while I found my own footing. The control he'd maintained for months finally shattered. Raw emotion transformed his features as he reached for her hand. I've loved you since that hospital room, he confessed. Your strength, your fierce love for Ivy, your uncompromising integrity, but I wouldn't act on it. You needed a partner, not another complication. And now, she asked softly, now I'm sitting here terrified that I've misread everything. That tomorrow you'll regret this conversation. I won't. She moved closer, eliminating the careful distance they'd maintained. But we need to be careful. For Ivy's sake. She's already attached to you. I would never do anything to hurt her. Or you. His voice was rough with emotion. Whatever this becomes, whatever you want it to be, I'm committed. Not just to you, but to both of you. That's what makes this possible. Most men would see her as an obstacle. You've always seen her as part of me, because she is. His hand lifted, hesitating before gently touching her cheek. The most beautiful part. When their lips met, it was gentle, questioning, a beginning rather than culmination. Months of careful restraint giving way to honest recognition of what had been building since that first meeting. They separated slowly, both slightly dazed by the shift from possibility to reality. We take this slowly, Sloane said, professional decisiveness returning. For Ivy, for us, we build this carefully. With intention, Gideon agreed, joy dancing in his eyes, with clear communication, with mutual respect. Exactly. She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. You really do understand me. I'm trying to, he replied honestly. I intend to spend considerable time perfecting the skill. Their relationship evolved with the same thoughtful care they brought to their professional partnership. Nothing rushed, nothing assumed, everything discussed with candor and intention. At work, they maintained professional boundaries. No preferential treatment, no public displays, no changes to reporting structures. At home, they discovered each other not as CEO and director, but as Gideon and Sloane, two people learning trust after both had been rejected by the parents who should have protected them. Sloane learned that Gideon's childhood had been materially comfortable but emotionally barren. His parents provided everything except actual presence. His drive for success stemmed not from greed but from desire to build something meaningful, to matter in ways his parents never had. Gideon discovered that Sloane's artistic passion had roots in survival. Poetry had been her escape from parents who fought constantly. Her mother's death when she was 20, leaving her alone with a father who'd never particularly liked her. The gallery she was building through the foundation was the stable, beautiful space she'd never had growing up. "I want Ivy to have what we didn't," Sloane admitted one evening, watching their daughter sleep. Certainty. The knowledge that she's valued for existing, not for achieving. She already does. Gideon's hand found hers in the darkness. "You've given her that from day one." "We're giving her that," Sloane corrected softly. The acknowledgement settled between them, recognition of the family they were deliberately constructing. When Ivy was 9 months old, Douglas Mercer reappeared. Sloane was at the foundation office, reviewing quarterly reports, when her assistant buzzed with unusual hesitancy. "Sloane, there's a Douglas Mercer here to see you. He says he's your father." The world tilted. Sloane gripped her desk, old fear and anger flooding her system. "Tell him I'm unavailable. He says he'll wait. He's quite insistent." Sloane closed her eyes, gathering herself. "Tell security to escort him out. If he refuses, call the police." Before her assistant could respond, Douglas pushed past her into Sloane's office, older than she remembered but still carrying himself with academic authority. "Sloane." His voice held false warmth that made her skin crawl. "You look well. Motherhood suits you. Get out." Her voice was ice. "I came to apologize." He gestured to the chair across from her desk. "May I sit?" "No. You may leave." Douglas's expression hardened, the mask slipping. "I made a mistake. I was harsh during that interview. I'd like a chance to make amends. 9 months too late. I want to meet my granddaughter." The words detonated in the space between them. "You don't have a granddaughter." Sloane stood, using height to establish dominance. "You made that abundantly clear on national television. People say things in anger." Douglas's tone shifted to something practiced, political. "I've reconsidered. Family is important." Sloane studied him, seeing calculation beneath contrition. "Why now? What do you really want?" Douglas had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I'm running for state education commissioner. The campaign advisors think a reconciliation narrative would humanize me. Estranged father reunites with daughter and grandchild. It's compelling." Rage, pure and clean, burned through Sloane's chest. "You want to use my daughter for your political ambitions. After rejecting her existence. After calling her an embarrassment. I was wrong." Douglas spread his hands in practiced supplication. "Let me make it right. Get out of my office." Sloane's voice was deadly quiet. "Get out before I have security remove you. I have rights as her grandfather. You have nothing." She stepped around her desk, years of stored pain channeling into focused fury. "You rejected her before she was born. You have made zero effort to know her. You don't get to appear when it's convenient and claim rights you never wanted. This doesn't have to be hostile. We can work something out. The only thing we're working out is how quickly you leave this building." Douglas's facade cracked completely, revealing contempt underneath. "You always were dramatic, turning everything into performance, and you were always cruel, masking it as concern for excellence." Before the situation could escalate further, Gideon appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Is there a problem?" His voice was calm, controlled, but something dangerous lurked beneath the surface. Douglas turned, assessing this new player. "And you are?" "Gideon Hartwell. I own this foundation." His gaze was steel. "You're Douglas Mercer. You're the man bankrolling my daughter's little project. I'm the man who recognized her genius and gave her resources to build something meaningful." Gideon moved into the room, positioning himself slightly between Sloane and Douglas. something you were apparently incapable of doing. This is a family matter. Then you should leave. You're not family. You're a man who publicly rejected his pregnant daughter. There's a difference. Douglas's face flushed with anger. I have legal rights to see my granddaughter. Actually, you don't. Gideon's voice remained measured. There are no grandparents' rights in New York for grandparents with no established relationship. You've never met Ivy, never provided support, never attempted contact until it became politically advantageous. Any petition you file will be dismissed. You seem very invested in my daughter's life. Douglas's tone dripped insinuation. Is this professional or personal? Both. Gideon didn't flinch. Sloan is an exceptional director building transformative programs. She's also someone I care about deeply. Both truths exist simultaneously. How touching, Douglas sneered, playing father to another man's child. I don't play anything. Gideon's composure cracked slightly, revealing the emotion underneath. I show up. I'm present. I choose them every day. That's what fatherhood actually is. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling between them. You should leave now. Sloan found her voice again, strength returning. You're trespassing. You've been asked to go. This isn't over. Yes, Gideon said quietly. It is. You made your choice 9 months ago on national television. Now, live with the consequences. After security escorted Douglas out, Sloan collapsed into her chair, adrenaline leaving her system in a rush that left her shaking. Gideon knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. You're okay. He's gone. He wants to use Ivy for his campaign. The words came out broken, anguished. She's not even a person to him. Just a prop. I know. We'll protect her, I promise. Can we? Legally? Catherine Winters is the best family law attorney in the state. We'll consult her today. Gideon's certainty was an anchor. Whatever he tries, we're ready. Sloan looked at him, this man who'd appeared in her life at her lowest point and stayed through everything. We. You keep saying we, because that's what this is. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. You, me, Ivy. We're a family, maybe not conventional but real. Tears she'd been holding back finally fell. I love you. I love you too. Both of you. His voice was rough with emotion. And I will spend every day proving that means something. Stop. Right here. This is the moment where most people would tell you to keep watching to see how it ends. But I'm going to tell you something different. You already know how this ends. You know Sloan and Ivy will be protected. You know Gideon will fight for them. You know Douglas will lose because men like him always lose when they're up against people who actually love. So the question isn't what happens next. The question is, what are you going to do with what you've just witnessed? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of you watching this have a Douglas in your life. Someone who rejected you, who's now trying to come back because it's convenient. Someone who wants access to your life, your children, your success, after doing nothing to help you build it. And you're probably wondering if you should let them in. If forgiveness means giving them another chance. If family obligation means accepting their terms. And I'm here to tell you something radical. You don't owe your abusers forgiveness. You don't owe toxic people access. You don't owe anyone who rejected you an opportunity to do it again. Boundaries aren't cruel. They're loving. They protect you and the people who actually showed up. If this resonates with you, if you've had to make the hard choice to keep someone out who thinks they have a right to be in, comment below with one word. Boundaries. That's it. Just that word. Because when we say it together, when we claim that right collectively, it becomes powerful. It becomes permission for someone else who's struggling with the same choice. And subscribe to Cedar Drama if you need regular reminders that protecting yourself isn't selfish. That choosing the people who chose you isn't wrong. That you get to decide who has access to your life. Now let me show you what happens when you stand firm. They consulted Catherine Winters that evening, sitting in her downtown office while Ivy napped in her carrier. Douglas Mercer has no legal standing, Catherine said after reviewing the situation. No relationship with the child, no support provided, no attempt at contact. His petition would be dismissed immediately. But he could still file. Cause problems. Sloan worried. He could. and it would be thrown out. But it might generate media attention he could use for his campaign, Catherine considered carefully. There's another option. Preemptive legal protection. What kind? She looked at Gideon. You've been Ivy's primary father figure since birth. You could petition for adoption. It would permanently establish your parental rights and eliminate any future claims from Mercer. Sloane's breath caught. Gideon went very still. I don't want to pressure. He looked at Sloane, vulnerable and hopeful. That's a massive decision. Yes. Sloane felt certainty settling in her chest. Yes, it is. And yes, I want you to, if you want to. Gideon's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I want nothing more. Then let's make it official. Make our family legally what it's already been in practice. 3 months later, they stood in family court before Judge Maria Callahan, a 20-year veteran known for her child-centered rulings. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just their attorney, a court reporter, and the judge. Ivy sat in Sloane's lap, 10 months old and curious about her surroundings. Judge Callahan reviewed the petition with careful attention. Mr. Hartwell, you're petitioning to adopt Ivy Mercer, correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you've been in her life since birth? Since the day she was born. I was present for her delivery. I've been a consistent caregiver ever since. Miss Mercer, you support this adoption? Absolutely. Sloane's voice was clear. Gideon has been Ivy's father in every way that matters. We're just making it legal. Judge Callahan studied them over her reading glasses. I've reviewed the extensive documentation you provided. Medical records listing Mr. Hartwell as emergency contact. Photos spanning 10 months showing consistent presence. Financial records of support. Statements from caregivers and medical professionals. She set down her papers. This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen. She looked at Ivy, who chose that moment to reach for Gideon, saying "Dada" with perfect clarity. Something softened in the judge's expression. The court finds that adoption is in the best interest of the child. Mr. Hartwell, you are hereby granted full parental rights. Ivy Mercer will become Ivy Mercer Hartwell. The gavel came down, and just like that, they were officially a family. Outside the courthouse, Sloane turned to Gideon, Ivy balanced on her hip. We did it, she said, joy and relief mingling in her voice. We did. He wrapped his arms around them both. Our family, legal and real. Ivy patted both their faces, delighted by their happiness, even if she didn't understand its source. 2 months later, on a quiet Sunday evening, Gideon planned something special. He arranged for Sloane's closest friend to take Ivy for a few hours, claiming he wanted a quiet dinner to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Ivy's birth. Sloane arrived home from the gallery to find her apartment transformed. Soft music played, candles lit, dinner prepared with obvious care. What's all this? She asked, touched by the effort. Celebration. Gideon pulled out her chair. Of everything we've built, dinner was perfect. Easy conversation about their days, Ivy's latest developments, upcoming foundation programs. As Gideon served dessert, Sloane noticed him growing slightly nervous. Are you okay? She asked. Yes. He took a deep breath. Actually, there's something I want to ask you. He stood, moved around the table, and knelt beside her chair. Sloane's heart stopped. Sloane Mercer. His voice trembled slightly despite obvious effort at composure. You've made me a better person, a father, a partner. You've shown me that family is built through daily choice, not biological accident. He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a stunning ring. Moonstone set in platinum, unusual and perfect. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing up for you and Ivy? Tears streamed down Sloane's face as she looked at this man who'd seen her worth when her own father denied it. Who'd chosen them both, every single day. Yes. She whispered, then laughed through her tears. Yes. 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 He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. Later, lying together on the couch, she studied the ring on her hand. It's perfect. How did you know? I remember you mentioning Moonstone in one of your poems. about cycles and change and new beginnings. You remember my poetry. I remember everything about you. They married 3 months later in the sculpture garden of the cultural center they'd built together. Spring flowers bloomed around them, art installations creating a backdrop that represented their shared vision. 60 guests attended. Close friends, foundation colleagues, artists whose lives they'd changed. Ivy took her role as flower girl with characteristic seriousness, placing each petal with deliberate care before abandoning her basket to run to Gideon. He lifted her easily, settling her on his hip as Sloane walked down the aisle. Their family, already formed, simply being formalized. The vows were simple and profound. I promise to show up, Gideon said, his voice steady despite emotion. Every day, every moment, for both of you, for whatever comes, always. You taught me that family is built, not born. Sloane's voice was clear. That love is a choice we make every morning, and I choose you, today, tomorrow, forever. They sealed their vows with a kiss, while Ivy clapped between them, delighted by the celebration. The reception flowed with warmth and laughter. As the sun set, Sloane found herself watching Gideon dance with Ivy, her tiny feet balanced on his shoes, her giggles filling the garden. Eleanor Chen, their most significant donor, appeared beside her. You've built something remarkable, Eleanor said softly. The foundation is extraordinary. But this, she gestured to Gideon and Ivy, this is your greatest creation. Sloane smiled, watching her family. He appeared exactly when I needed him. Maybe. Or maybe you both appeared exactly when each other needed you. This is where I need you to do something for me. Something that matters more than you realize. Look at what just happened in this story. A woman was publicly humiliated, rejected by her father, left alone and pregnant. And instead of that being the end, it was the beginning. The beginning of a family built on choice instead of obligation. On presence instead of biology. On daily commitment instead of genetic accident. But here's what nobody tells you about stories like this. They don't just happen. They require someone to make the first move. Someone to see worth where others see failure. Someone to show up when showing up is inconvenient. And right now, someone in your life needs you to be that person. Someone needs you to see them, to show up, to choose them when everyone else walked away, and you're hesitating because you're afraid of being used, afraid of getting hurt, afraid that your love won't be enough. But what if it is? What if your presence is exactly what changes everything for someone else? This is your permission to take that risk, to be the Gideon in someone else's story, to show up even when you're not sure how it'll turn out. Like this video if you've ever been someone's Gideon. If you've ever chosen someone who wasn't blood but became family, share this story with the person who showed up for you when they didn't have to. Tag them. Thank them. Let them know they changed your life. And subscribe to Cedar Drama because we're building something here. A community of people who believe that showing up matters. That choice creates family. That love is a verb, not a feeling. Now let me show you what happens years later, when the family they built faces its biggest test. Years passed in the gentle rhythm of family life. The foundation expanded internationally. Ivy started preschool, showing artistic talent that surprised no one. They welcomed Marcus 2 years later, a son who inherited Gideon's thoughtful nature and Sloane's creative spirit. When Ivy turned 7, her sharp mind began asking complex questions about family structure. "Mama," she said one evening during dinner, "why do some kids have different families than us?" "Families come in all forms," Sloane explained gently. "Some have 2 moms, some have a mom and stepdad, some have grandparents raising them. Every family is different. But I just have you and Daddy and Marcus." "That's right," Gideon confirmed. "Was it always just us?" The question they'd been preparing for, dreading and ready for simultaneously. "Before you were born," Sloane began carefully, "I was with someone else. Your biological father. He wasn't ready to be a parent when you came along." Ivy absorbed this, processing with characteristic seriousness. Not ready like when Marcus isn't ready for big scissors? Something like that. Some people aren't ready for the responsibility. But Daddy was ready. "I met your mother when you were still in her tummy," Gideon explained. "And when you were born, I fell in love with both of you. I knew I wanted to be your father, even though you didn't come from me biologically. So, you chose to be my daddy? It was the easiest choice I've ever made. Gideon's voice was rough with emotion. And the best one. Ivy nodded, satisfied. I'm glad you chose us. Me too, little one. Every single day. As Ivy grew, questions naturally evolved, becoming more detailed as her understanding deepened. Each time, they answered with age-appropriate honesty, never hiding truth but never burdening her with adult complications. When she found old footage of the disastrous interview at age 10, her hurt was profound but her understanding clear. He said he didn't want me. She sobbed in Gideon's arms. He was wrong. Gideon held her gently. So terribly wrong. His inability to see what a gift you are was his failing, not yours. Why didn't he want me? Some people aren't capable of putting others first. It wasn't about you. It was about his limitations. Are you sad he's not my dad? Not for a single second. Being your father is the greatest privilege of my life. By 12, Ivy had developed her own clear understanding, articulated with characteristic directness when a classmate made a thoughtless comment about real parents. My real father is the one who taught me to ride a bike and checks my homework and shows up for every concert, she informed the boy. Biology is just science. Family is love. Now, watching Ivy and Marcus argue good-naturedly over a board game, Gideon wrapped his arm around Sloane's waist. She's extraordinary, he murmured. They both are. They came by it honestly. Sloane leaned into his embrace. They've had an extraordinary example. Through the window, sunset painted their home in golden light. Not the family they'd expected, but the one they'd deliberately built, choice by conscious choice. Do you ever think about how different things might have been? Sloane asked. If that interview hadn't happened? Every day, Gideon acknowledged. That interview was simultaneously the worst and best thing that happened to us. To us, she corrected, turning in his arms. It brought us together. It did. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. And I'd go through it all again. Every court battle, every sleepless night, every challenge. For this, for you, for Ivy and Marcus, for our family. Sloane rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat that had become her children's lullaby and her own source of certainty. Me too, she whispered, every single time. Because they discovered the fundamental truth that shaped their journey. Family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who shows up for you, who chooses you, who loves you without condition or reservation. And Gideon had chosen them. Every single day. Forever. Family isn't determined by biology. It's built through thousands of small moments of showing up, of choosing love when rejection would be easier, of seeing worth that others miss. You've just watched a story about a man who rejected his daughter on live television, unaware that the person watching would change everything. But this isn't really a story about Gideon or Sloane or even little Ivy. It's a story about you, about the choice you face right now. You can close this video and go back to scrolling, back to whatever distraction was filling your time before this story found you, or you can let this story change you. You can decide right now that you're going to be someone who shows up, someone who sees worth in people others overlook, someone who builds family through choice instead of accepting whatever biology handed you. Here's what I need you to do. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that your most devastating moments can become doorways to lives you never imagined possible, leave a comment. Tell us about your chosen family, about the person who showed up when blood relatives walked away, about the moment you realized family is a verb, not a noun. Your story matters. Someone watching right now needs to hear it. Someone is in the middle of their own rejection, wondering if they'll survive it, wondering if anything good can come from this pain. And your comment might be exactly what gives them hope. Share this video. Not because I'm asking for engagement, but because someone in your network needs this message. That single mom wondering if she can do it alone. That kid who was disowned for being themselves. That person still waiting for validation from people who will never give it. They need to know that better is possible. That chosen family is real. That showing up matters more than showing off. Subscribe to Cedar Drama because we're not just telling stories here. We're building a community of people who believe that love is a choice we make every morning. That presence is the greatest gift we can offer. That family is what we build, not what we're born into. And before you go, I want you to do one more thing. Think about the person in your life who showed up when they didn't have to, who chose you when choosing you was inconvenient, who loved you without expecting anything in return. Reach out to them today. Right now. Send them this video. Tell them thank you. Tell them they changed your life. Because people like that, people who show up, they don't hear it enough. They don't know how much they matter. This is your chance to tell them. This is your chance to be the reason someone keeps showing up for someone else. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this journey. Until next time, remember that your story isn't over. The people who rejected you don't get to write your ending. And somewhere, someone is waiting to show up for you in ways you never imagined possible. Keep your heart open to that possibility. Keep choosing love. Keep building family. And keep showing up, because that, more than anything else, is what changes everything.